Hey guys, Thomas from Team Sakurasou here, and I want to talk to you guys about what a Tier 0 format is, because currently right now we are in a Tier 0 format. Tier Limit Ishizu is running about 78 to 82% of top 32s at regionals or bigger events. And for a lot of players, this is their first Tier 0 format because we have not had a Tier 0 format in about 5 years. So a lot of new players coming from Master Duel, they're coming back from the pandemic or anything of the sort. Point is, we have a lot of new players. So I want to make a video describing exactly what a Tier 0 format is. Now before I get into it, if you guys could smash that like button and subscribe, that'd be great. I will be talking about my experiences as well in Tier 0 formats from the ones that I have personally played. So if you guys have played in Tier 0 formats and you disagree with me or you want to just share your own experience, I would love to hear it in the comment section below because it's one of my favorite things to interact with you guys, especially when it comes to like past formats I've experienced. It's one of my favorite things. If you're buying any cards off TCG Player, please use my affiliate link down in the description below. Helps out the channel to no additional cost to you. And if you guys love me making content and you want to support me making content so I can make this more of a job, consider being a YouTube channel member. We have a Discord and it's popping. So we're going to get right into it. A Tier 0 format is described when a deck or archetype gets 65% or more tops at a regional or higher. So basically an extremely large presence. Now to say it in my own words, I would say a deck that is easily the best deck in the format by far if you want to get results, right? It's the most competitive deck in the game currently, as well as usually has to do with power creep. For example, Duelist Alliance, that set power creep crept the game, and nothing when Duelist Alliance came out, people couldn't play anything else besides post Duelist Alliance and further on when we got Necros, right? So basically it killed all stuff before. That's why I see Duelist Alliance as a Tier 0 set, essentially, if that makes sense. So that's describe it in my own words. Now, Dragon Rulers was my first Tier 0 format, and putting nostalgia aside, which could be difficult for some, it was probably one of the best Tier 0 formats, as well as it was pretty fun. Now, Dragon Ruler really got the cusp of 65%. Usually Tier 0 formats that we've had that we're going to go over further on, like Zoo or Pepe, had basically 100%. Dragon Ruler was right at the tippy top there at 65%. With Prophecy being one of the only other decks that you could really play, and that's why it's kind of a bit debated if that format was Tier 0 or not. In my opinion, it was. Some times the deck would get like a 60 to 62% win rate at top 32s instead of the 65. So people said, oh, it's like Tier 0.5. I'm like, just call it Tier 0. Now the reason why I had fun with this format is because Yu-Gi-Oh! Back when Tachyon Galaxy came out was a lot different, where we weren't interrupting each other as much, and we could play no matter what, essentially, right? The Dragon Lord won by overpowering your opponent and just getting more card advantage, but this did not mean that your deck was necessarily stopped at what it was doing. The board would break easily and you wouldn't be able to get over their board, for the most part. Now, the reason why is because we had cards like Dracosac, which by the way I told people to pick up in one of my 5 cards out of your trade binder because of Shatri Law, and I'm glad to see that card still be busted 10 years later, to be honest. But the reason why Dracosac was really strong was because once it made its tokens, it was very hard to beat because you had to get rid of the tokens before the Dracosac, as well as Big Eye just taking your opponent's monster was really strong as well, and the deck could consistently get big monsters out on board and just plus regardless, as well as having reborns, pops, and a lot of utility in the core deck before even going into the extra decks, the extra deck, before you really got a chance to do anything. So it really overpowered you in a way that other decks never did. Now, I played Medolce back then, and we did not have Medolce Angele back then, but the greatest part about playing Medolce was I didn't really have to deal with Dracosac because I just spun it back into the extra deck. And by the way, Dracosac was closer to a $200 card back then, with Big Eye being roughly around $100. And you needed 3 of each, so your extra deck started at $900 before you even touched the main, which the main consisted of basically 12 $5 to $8 rares, which was pretty insane. You had cards like Super Reju. The deck was very, very expensive. I think the total of the deck was anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000, so a lot more expensive for this deck than, say, issue tier where I think you could build a deck for 400 or less. It's just a field spell that's a problem. But yeah, so the deck was very fun to play against because it was very challenging, and when you won, you just felt like a great player. The deck also took a lot of skill where just because it wasn't as forgiving didn't mean that in the long run you would win if you were a bad player. The deck certainly did carry bad players because I personally believe that tier 0 decks will carry players besides in the mirror match. Now, the mirror match was very fun to watch with Dragon Rulers because depending on how you opened up and how you would interact with what your opponent put up was very big because there was a lot of mind games with people big-eyeing a big eye to big-eye another big eye or a Draco sack. Like we had like 2-3 big eyes going off in one turn, and it was just absolute madness. Now this didn't last too long. When we got our ban list, I believe Konami hit like 6 to 9 cards of the deck, and then we got all the Dragon Lures banned the next format because the deck was still consistently good. I think it was still tier 0 even. So it was definitely a format where you could play wherever you want and had fun. But if you want, again, since it is a tier 0 format, if you want to play the best deck, you had 2 options, which was Dragon Lure or Prophecy. Now, we did have a Rogue once in a while, but most top 32s consisted of those 2 decks. Now, the next format that I played was, I believe it was Pepe. Now, Pepe, I want to say I played Pepe, but here's what really happened during Pepe. Everyone I knew almost every person I knew who played Yu-Gi-Oh! That did not play Pepe stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For that time. They said, this is ridiculous. I wasn't playing too much Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time, but I saw what the deck did, and I thought to myself, what is this? There were even, I'm not going to say names, but there were even duels where people would, once they rolled the die, they would just show the hand. Okay, game 2, cool. Show the hand. Can you do anything? No. Game 3. I have the hand. GG. Right? They would literally, when people talk about a game being won by a dice roll, I don't think there's any better format to describe that than Pepe, because Pepe was absolutely ridiculous. We have an emergency ban list for Pepe, by the way, and a lot of people said, oh, well, it didn't have too much chances to shine. It didn't need any chances to shine. Put it back in the gutter. Right? So we had an emergency ban list to handle that deck. And I think that's why Konami is very scared of pendulums at times, because for Konami to put an emergency ban list, things have to be very, very bad. That's why I don't think we're going to add an emergency ban list for this format, because, again, when I compare it to other tier 0 formats, besides Dragon Ruler, because Dragon Ruler had about 65%, 82% is way better than 100%. But getting on to the next, because I really don't have much to say about Pepe, except for how ridiculous it was I believe Zodiac. I believe Zodiac came before Spiral, or I don't actually remember which ones came before when it comes to tier 0 formats, because 2016, 2017, we had a lot of tier 0 going along. That's why I barely actually played the game, because I don't enjoy mirror matches. Now, Zodiac came along, and Zodiac was very different than any other tier 0 deck. Now, number one, if you give Zodiac any form of love or any sort of cards, they will still pop up. I mean, Tri-Brigade Zodiac was getting top 32s and top 4s and even winning events, as well as other Zodiac builds a little bit, even in the year of 2021 and 2020. I'm not sure about 2022, but 2021 for sure. And I believe that Zodiac, in my opinion, is one of the most degenerate archetypes, and probably one of Konami's worst mistakes, because just like Spiral, nothing's really a once per turn. The deck was seeing about close to 100% of top 32, if not 100%. But the difference between Zodiac and a lot of other tier 0 decks was that Zodiac could easily be run with something if you want it. So some of the ways Zodiacs were incorporated with other strategies was Kaiju Zodiacs, Pendulum Zodiacs. There was one random Fire King Zodiacs. The point is that you can mix Zodiacs with a lot of other archetypes, even when they actually got, I believe, the one Trident back off the ban list before it got banned again. You can even play it with Eldritch to get, you could do it in strategies to get Zeus as well. And the deck was the archetype was very, very strong. Now, a lot of players liked Zodiac because they, again, liked the mirror match, but fighting against a set 4 of multiple negates and pass, basically depending on how you open up, it doesn't matter how good you open up, you cannot play through all the interrupts. Didn't really seem that fun to me, and I hated Zodiac. Now, during Zodiac, I actually got a lot of my friends back from Yu-Gi-Oh! Because I actually did not play that format. I just saw replays and all that. And I remember going to a card shop to show with some friends, and they had a Yu-Gi-Oh! Locals, and it was about a third of the people, and they were all playing Zodiac. The amount of people who actually quit during Zodiac or took a break during Zodiac is pretty ridiculous, and it kind of, every time a lot of people are saying, oh, people aren't really quitting this Tier 0 format, or oh, people aren't really taking breaks, or they'll be back. Yes, of course they'll be back, you idiot. They don't like the format, that's why they left, right? But we're always going to get a lot of players who are either going to quit / take a break during Tier 0 formats. If you're a pro or very competitive, usually you're going to like them. If you're more casual, you're most likely not going to like Tier 0 formats. And if you're anywhere in the middle, well, your opinion could be whatever, I guess. So that's kind of what I think of Zodiac. Now, Zodiac and Pepe were way worse than Tier Limit Ishizu, but that leads me to the last deck, which was Spiral. Now, Spiral Tier 0 was very odd to me because whenever I played Spiral, I don't know if it's because I played bad players, but what really bothered me and what really kept up the card advantage was something like Zodiac. And again, this was kind of a bad year for card design, where they just said, you know what? Let's make soft once per turns, right? You know, we don't windups how windups needed to get hit because of loops and all that, because we said once while they're on the field. Look, we didn't learn our lesson. We didn't learn our lesson. Let's do that multiple times, right? And I believe that one of the keys to screwing over Yu-Gi-Oh! Is to forget about once per turn, or make an archetype that is based on soft once per turns. In my opinion, that is a good way to just throw any type of integrity the game has away. So, will Konami make the same mistake again? Of course, they're Konami, right? I have zero faith in them. In fact, I'll be honest with you, Konami just gets worse. Like, I'd rather have, like, 2016 Konami than what we have now. But, regardless, the format was pretty bad, but a lot of people preferred it better than Zodiac or Pepe, and I feel like a lot of players kind of started leaving at this point. The game obviously did recover later on, and then got hurt again when we got Master Duel 4 announced, because Master Duel 4 basically prevented players, because realistically, right, or I should say legally, if you want to go and you want to play a really awful deck, yes, you could lose all 100 games, but you can play that deck. Now with Master Rule 4, you couldn't really play certain decks until they got a Link monster, essentially, or you'd have to figure out a way to play it without screwing over your extra monsters. And I believe that is kind of what hurt the game overall in the long run, and that's just my opinion, but I think that's what hurt it the least. Now for Tier 0 formats, this is my advice to a lot of players who have played Tier 0 formats. By the way, I still see Spiral as worse than Issue Tier, so this is my advice. If you don't like the format now, it's not a horrible thing to leave the game for a bit. Or just play locals, right? A lot of players play locals for a couple months, or even years, or even all the time. In fact, I think the majority of players usually go to 1 or 2 events max in their Yu-Gi-Oh! Career, let's say, right? Either they just don't have the time, or it's too much, or they're happy just going to their locals and playing with their friends and having fun, because the majority of players are casual in this game. Now, what I would personally do is, if you don't want to leave the game and take a break to go into another card game or another hobby, or maybe pick up a skill, I don't know, you know, learn to read, is I would get into older formats. Now, Edison is getting quite popular, and a lot of players might be thinking, oh, well, what about GOAT? Well, of course, everyone's going to tell you to get into GOAT, but there's a lot of older formats besides Edison. In fact, if this is your first Tier 0 format, maybe you could practice mirrors in other Tier 0 formats. Maybe learn more about the game in Tier 0 formats. Or if you really want to have a screw with people, and you're like, you know what, I don't really like these players playing Tier 0. Something you could do, and I do know players who do this, is they make a deck specifically to counter one deck. The deck's not that great outside of it, but when they play the Tier 0 deck, they just win. I've seen people play locals, and they play a really gimmicky deck that beats a Tier 0 deck, and they just win it, right? Again, that is a locals, granted, right? This format does have other decks you could play as well. You could take this format to collect, Or you could try to kind of duke it out. Because again, like I said, if this is one of the weakest Tier 0 formats, the next time we get a Tier 0 format, you guys should be a little bit better prepared. And it's not going to get much better than this. I don't see another Tier 0 format where, like Dragon Ruler, you could play other decks, but this deck's going to have 65% plus, right? I see the next Tier 0 format, we're getting something either like this, or if I had to put a bet on it, much worse, with a deck getting closer to 100% of top 32s. So that was kind of my opinion. I just want to talk a little bit about Tier 0 formats and all. I was supposed to give you guys an OTS 20 pack opening, and I will be. I'm actually going to have 2 separate videos on it. OTS 20 openings, because I'll hopefully be getting 75 packs, 20 and then 55. So with that being said, let me know what you guys thought about this video. Do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree? Let me know. Leave a like and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.